Your reasons for listening to the show, well, those are your own. But just keep in mind that the views, information, or opinions expressed on the Tuddle Daily Podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of our sponsors. Yeah, it's called free speech, people. Nobody's forcing you to listen.
Get ready for your daily dose of Tuddle.
The all-time greatest intern/producer we've ever had, of course, Tuddle. Tuddle in Florida.
From the Hobo Fish Camp, it's the Tuddle Daily Podcast.
No wonder nobody likes you, Tuddle. Everything's a goddamn debate.
Chill out. Drink a 7-Up. Eat a moon pie. Quit murdering people.
Welcome back to another edition of the Tuddle Daily Podcast. I got a great interview. I've always been interested in people that are serial killers, people that are serial murderers. I don't know if there's a big difference, but I'm sure my next guest will be able to tell me, because living in the state of Florida, it seems like that's where all the serial killers have wanted to go to. My good friend, Billy Corbin, who is a documentarist, said that Florida is a sunny place for shady people to hide. And my next guest is Mr. Bruce Sackman. Bruce, how are you today?
I'm terrific.
What do you think about that? Florida, why is Florida? Why do a lot of serial killers come to Florida?
Well, in my experience, in my world, which is a concentration on medical serial killers, It seems like Texas has you guys beat.
Really?
Yeah, I'd have to say, and I love Texas, and I have family in Texas, but I have to say, when you look at the numbers, the greatest number of medical serial killers, that is doctors and nurses who have murdered their patients.
Is that where that angel of death nurse chick was at in Texas? Or
there are many of them in Texas. In fact, the most recent one, which was just in the newspaper the other day, I happened to pick up the New York Post, and it says, alleged Texas serial killer accused of murdering 18 to stand trial.
Oof.
And that's in Texas.
Now, Bruce, before we get into this, tell people a little bit about yourself, your background, what got you interested in this medical serial killer topic, and how people can find out your content, website, book, all that good stuff.
Well, I served as the special agent in charge of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Office of Inspector General, Criminal Investigation Division for the Northeast. And what that long title means is that I was responsible for all major criminal investigations involving the VA medical centers from West Virginia to Maine.
What makes something criminal and not medical negligence?
It really comes down to intent. Medical errors are the third leading cause of death in the United States.
Yep.
But when we speak about medical murders, we're speaking about an intentional murder. We're talking about medical professionals who intentionally wanted to murder their patients.
But how do you prove intent, though? Like, most of these people that are working in these fields are smart, and they could always say, well, it was just an accident. Or do you build a pattern of they've had people in the past die in a certain way that's similar?
Well, unfortunately, there almost always is a pattern, and that's what separates medical serial killers from your traditional serial killers, because the average medical serial killer kills somewhere between 30 and 60 people. Whereas, I guess, your traditional serial killer may kill, under 10. And the reason being that it's very, very difficult to identify and prosecute these people. And most cases start this way. It starts something like this. They say, every time this Nurse Bruce is on duty, the death rate goes up. Nurse Bruce takes a vacation, the death rate goes down. Now, that doesn't mean that Nurse Bruce is a serial killer, but that's where it starts. But look how many victims there are before people start to question the activities of this one particular nurse or doctor.
Who is, okay, like everybody knows, like Ted Bundy, okay? Ted Bundy is like the stereotypical serial killer. He was a rage killer at one point, he did all that stuff. Who is the coup d'etat? Like, I'm not saying like it's an award or anything, but like that we know of, who has the biggest death toll when it comes
Well,
to medical
I
serial?
would have to say that the undisputed, undefeated champion of medical serial killers is Dr. Harold Shipman from England, who killed about 300 of his patients.
Wow. Now,
Um,
how was he? Now, what years were this?
This is going back into the 80s and the 90s
Why did it take so long?
because no one wanted to actually believe, and this is true throughout the world, no one wants to believe that a person who has taken an oath to save lives, that is dedicated to saving lives, is actually intentionally taking lives. Look, they work in an atmosphere where people perform miracles every day. You know, the last hospital I was in, it was incredible. They were performing miracles and saving lives. Who would believe that somebody in that universe of such wonderful people is intentionally taking lives? So the management and even the co-workers, they will search for every possible explanation as to why the patient expired, other than the fact that they were murdered. They just simply can't believe it. And even after some of these medical serial killers plead guilty, the staff is still questioning it. They're still shocked. They say, you know, I saw that nurse Bruce save so many lives, and now you're telling me he was actually putting them into cardiac arrest to begin with?
Is it an overdose of sodium penthol, or like what is the main like method of, like, could it be an air bubble and the syringe, or is that a old wise tale, like if you could shoot an air bubble into somebody's IV,
Well,
or
that actually did recently happen again in Texas, but I could tell you that the majority of deaths occur from chemicals that are readily available in the medical center.
potassium?
The biggest chemicals used are epinephrine, which is adrenaline, which will speed up your heart and kill you. And the other most commonly used chemical is succinylcholine. In the hospital, they call it sucks. And what it does, it actually paralyzes you temporarily so they can put a tube down you. And if
so you stop breathing then, basically.
exactly. And if those drugs aren't used properly, you could take somebody out.
What about an overdose of insulin? Do you think that's ever been used?
Very common. Very common. As a matter of fact, the most recent case at the VA in West Virginia, a nurse killed 13 patients by using that. And the thing about insulin is, like, unlike some other drugs, insulin is readily available. So it's not kept with it's not kept with narcotics. It's very easily and very readily available. And the nurses have an opportunity to grab it and use it incorrectly if they so desire.
So why is this happening more? Is it, I know that your background is working in the VA, okay, but does this happen in the VA more than we know about?
I would like to think not. I think one of the reasons why the VA cases do surface is because the VA, unlike the private sector, has an inspector general. An inspector general is a place where people could come in large complaints after they go to the management, and the management usually poo-poos it. And this is very, very common. What happens is that nurses and sometimes physicians are very concerned about one of their coworkers, and they'll go to the management, and the last thing the management wants to hear is somebody on staff is intentionally killing people.
Because we can curse on this, but my dad always had a saying, shit rolls uphill when it comes to you see what I'm saying? Like the blame game, it all goes uphill when you think it would go downhill.
In fact, the management often makes it very difficult for the whistleblowers. So they usually wind up protecting the person that's under investigation and giving a really hard time to the whistleblowers. And out of frustration, that's when the whistleblowers, at least at the VA, they have an inspector general they could turn to. But in the private sector, they don't have an inspector general. And the best thing they could hope is to try to get the police interested. And that's going to be a very, very, very tough deal. Look, let's face it. most cops don't become cops because we're good in chemistry and biology, okay? So we're very easily intimidated by not only the science, but by the rules and the regulations and the laws that cover hospitals. You know, we have this HIPAA law, this law that prevents access to certain records, and it gets very confusing. It's called the Health Insurance Board.
Do you need a warrant though? Do you need like all right, so let me back up. Right now on the line with me is Mr. Bruce Sackman. Bruce, tell people how they can check out, find your book or go to your website.
Well, the website is the same name as the book, www.behindthemurdercurtain.com. And the book is available on Amazon or any of the major sites. It's a very, very quick read. It's an inexpensive book to purchase, but I think people find it to be a real eye-opener. They're really, really surprised as to what has gone on and what continues to go on. Just about every month, you open up the newspaper and you read about a story like the last one in Texas.
Now, do you work for the military or are you an outside contractor? Like you were doing the VA stuff?
When I was with the VA, I was an employee of the VA, and then I retired from that in 2005. And then I became the director of internal investigations for a large major medical center in the Northeast. Retired from that, and then went to the Nassau County Inspector General's office, retired from that, and now I'm doing consulting work. And I've consulted with police departments and hospitals all over the world. One of the most recent ones and most exciting ones, actually, was a nurse in Germany who confessed to killing over 100 patients. But we actually suspect him killing about 300 patients. And in order to do these investigations correctly, it requires the police to exhume bodies. So that means you go to the family and you ask the family permission, or you get a court order. And
sometimes they don't want to, though, right? Like they would just rather let it lie, correct? Or do most of them cooperate?
I must tell you, in my cases, the families were fantastic. Not only did they cooperate, but sometimes they wanted to actually come to the cemetery and watch how we exhumed the body. And I understand that. And we were, of course, very, very respectful and promised the family that we would return the body and the coffin in pristine condition, of course, which we always did. But it's quite a culture experience for someone who's never done that before to go into a morgue and watch an autopsy.
I guess you don't have a weak stomach, do you?
No, you know what? It didn't bother me, but it's curious. We had one or two assistant U.S. attorney prosecutors who would walk in the mall, turn around and walk right out because they just really couldn't take the autopsy. You know,
is it more the smell or the visual?
I would say it was both. I think the smell is a little bit overrated, to tell you the truth, but the visual, particularly, I found when we exhumed the bodies had the appearance. Do you remember that show, Tales of the Crypt?
Yes, yeah, like the Crypt Keeper, very, very taut, tight skin. You can see the bones. It's almost like a mummification, almost.
Exactly. But when you see a person that was just killed, fresh kill, if you will.
And that had to be bad. Yeah.
That takes some getting used to. It does take some getting used to, but it's incredible what they can find with today's modern toxicology and pathology. It's just really incredible. And what we had to do in our cases is we had to exhume the bodies, and then we had to do with the pathology and the toxicology, and we were able to determine that there were substances in the body, like epinephrine and like succinylcholine, that should have never been there.
How long does that stuff stay, though? Like, how much time do you have before that you, like, any good defense attorney could be like, well, this was way too long. There's no way, they got to be wrong.
Well, it does vary from substance to substance. Some substances disappear very quickly. You're absolutely right. Others, we could still find traces even in embalmed tissue, which is what we did. I mean, there is a particular device. It's called the high pressure liquid chromatography tandem mass spectrometer. I love that, but I don't really understand how it works.
Is this catching air, or is this like what is this doing, or is it like
no? It's actually analyzing the tissues and testing for traces of particular substances. And in our case, it was traces of succinylcholine and traces of epinephrine in the various cases that we've had throughout the country. Mm-hmm. But throughout the world, there have been other substances used as well.
All right, so I got so many questions here. Well, what is the difference between the serial killer that people, the generic, I hate to say generic because, I mean, but I'm talking like a Ted Bundy, the people that are using blunt force trauma or knives or pistols or strangulation. And what is the difference in the psychology between those type of serial killers and the doctors? Because my theory on the whole thing is, how they always say doctors like to play God, but they're always trying to save people, for the most part, because like you said, they take that oath. But is it kind of like a God complex of like, I get to decide who lives and dies?
Well, it's very interesting that you asked that question. And I can tell you that in my experience, one size does not fit all. But one of the most common reasons that we find people kill, and they actually finally admit to this, is something called Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
Yeah.
Also known as factitious disorder. And what it is, if let's say a mom has Munchausen syndrome by proxy, well, she will intentionally harm a child and bring that child in the hospital to show the staff what a loving, caring parent she is, when in fact she actually hurt the child.
Do you remember the movie The Sixth Sense? Did you ever remember that one? The one where the little kid and Bruce Willis, he said he could see dead people. Yes. You remember where the one ghost, like when to tell him where the tape was, and the mom was like putting like ammonia or like some detergent or something in her soup, like toilet bowl cleaner, in her soup every day to make her sick. So she kept going to the hospital.
Exactly. Well, it's the same thing with some nurses and some doctors, because they crave the excitement of a code. And when you have a code in the hospital, it's very
sometimes it can be boring.
Yeah, I mean, the bells and whistles go off, and the crash cart comes in, and the doctors and nurses come running in, and they would love to show the staff how skilled they are, how caring they are, how wonderful they are during the code, when in fact they actually caused the code to begin with.
And they know the whole time, and they're looking around, and they're just like, look at this whole scene I created. I'm like the puppet master here.
Well, one particular serial killer that's in the book, her name is Kristen Gilbert. She definitely suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, but it even went further, because every time a code was called, her boyfriend, who happened to be a VA police officer, was required to respond to the code as well. And during the code, there was actually like grab ass going on. It became almost like a sexual experience.
Like almost foreplay to them.
Exactly. So it was even more exciting for her to put people into a code and to cause this to happen. So that is really, I would say, one of the most common reasons, but not the only reason. I mean, some people just kind of crave the power of life and death over someone. Yeah. It's very interesting. Donald Harvey was a famous medical serial killer. And they asked Donald Harvey, they said, why did you kill these people? And he says, well, people controlled me for 18 years, and then I controlled my own destiny. I controlled other people's lives, whether they lived or died. I had that power to control. After I didn't get caught for the first 15, I thought it was my right. I appointed myself judge, prosecutor, and jury, so I played God. And you know what? If you kill 15 people and your coworkers don't even raise an eyebrow, maybe you think you were ordained by God to do something like this.
Now, this might be a weird question, and I'm sure you've gotten it before. would you, in your opinion, consider Jack Kevorkian a medical serial killer?
No, I really don't. I really don't.
I don't either. It was just a question that popped into my head.
No, I don't. And I'm actually not opposed to medical assisted suicide if it's done right, with a lot of people consenting and studying the issue. And if somebody's in incredible pain, I mean, I'm not opposed to that. But these cases are completely different.
Oh yeah, I know that. I completely get that. It was just a question. Like you got to understand the way I do interviews. I have questions, but I'd like to branch off the stuff that people ask or answer and everything. And that was just a question that I popped into my head because a lot of people hated Jack Kevorkian, and I thought he was doing he was doing some great work in my opinion.
Yeah, listen, I don't have a problem with that at all. My problem lies with the people that I've explained, the doctors and nurses who just intentionally murder their patients. Let me leave this with your audience.
Okay.
Natural death is like shutting off a fan, and the blades just gradually slow down and stop. But these victims, it's like turning off a light bulb. They're bright 1 minute and dark
and just bam out.
And if you've ever had a loved one in the hospital that was near death, I mean, the family knew, the staff knew. Yeah. Death was not a surprise. For these victims, death was a total surprise. I mean, many times they would visit dad and say, hey, you know what? Dad seems to be getting better, so let's go on vacation and we'll come back and we'll see him.
He's gone.
To get a phone call that dad had expired unexpectedly.
Now, when this stuff happens in the VA hospitals, do these people that are found as suspects, do they get tried by the military or do they get a regular court appearance? Because in the military, you got different rights when it comes to your, criminal rights. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no. The VA is actually a civilian agency.
Oh, okay. All right. I did not know that.
Yeah, the VA is a civilian agency. It's not part of the military. I mean, they service all the military individuals when they leave the service and go back into the private sector. And generally, they do a really, really good job. But in a system as large as the VA, with hundreds of hospitals and millions of employees, I mean, you're going to get some bad boys and girls.
Now, I think a murderer is, like a serial killer. Like I said before, that uses blunt force trauma or knives or weapons and stuff like that. They get to see the life go out of these people's body. Are these nurses, these doctors actually standing over? Or do they just inject, walk away, and then, if they die, they die? Is it because, like I said, some of the other serial killers, the generalized ones, are the ones that like to see the gore, the blood, and all that stuff. What? I don't know. I really don't think there is a difference. But are these people just they don't have the stomach to be able to do it the way a normal serial killer would, or is this just all right, I'm just going to do this?
Well, their excitement comes from the incident that they create.
Yes. Okay. All right. Yeah. So it would
a code, or they look. If you've ever been in a hospital ward at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's usually not that much activity. Maybe a nurse and a nurse's aide. So that nurse or doctor could go to the patient and put that curtain around him and the patient. And nobody's going to really see what's going on. Do
you think they're talking? I don't know how anybody would ever know this, but do the patients know what's going on, or the doctors kind of talking this through to them, hey, I'm about to kill you, or do they just I don't know.
We only know that's a wonderful question. But we only know from those victims that have survived. Now, on occasion, the medical serial killers fail to kill. And what happens is that those few patients that have lived say, oh, yeah, you know what? That blonde-haired, blue-eyed doctor came over to me and he injected me with something and waved bye-bye. And the next thing you know, I I would have died if I didn't start shaking those bed rails, and a nurse came in and saved my life. And it's very interesting because with one particular serial killer, his name was Michael Swango, there were two people that survived, and their stories are identical. And this is what they say. They say, I was lying in bed, this blonde hair, blue-eyed doctor came over, injected something in my IV, waved bye-bye, and then the next thing you know,
I'm waking up.
Right. And when you interview that person who happened to be in Ohio, and then you interview a victim who happened to be in Africa, the words are identical. The words are identical. So we know from the survivors that the medical serial killers do like to sit there a while and actually watch, but
admire their work.
But there are some of them that are even more brutal. In the case of Dr. Swango, after the patient expired, he would call up the families and go into great detail about Dad's last 20 minutes before he died, because this was Swango's second bite at excitement. First excitement was actually putting people into code. The second excitement was calling up the families and sort of torturing them by letting them know everything that happened to Dad, how he suffered those last 20 minutes of his life.
I don't know, man. Like if that, I mean, that's like somebody taunting you, like intercepting you for a pick six and running it back and taunting you. I know it's a horrible comparison, but I just know, like, I would want a little bit of retribution, man. Oh man. Now let me ask you this: do any of them like try to OD people with like? Because if you're gonna kill me, at least kill me with like some good pain medicine or something. Like I hate to say that, but I'm just saying, like, if I'm gonna go out, like, shoot me up with like an overdose of like Demerol or something.
Well, let me quote medical serial killer named Janine Jones, also from Texas, by the way, who killed a number of children. All right. And this is what she said: what happens to the patient does not matter to the caretakers. What matters is what the incident does for them. So that's all they care about. They care about the excitement and the thrill of taking this person out and getting away with it.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if I was going to be a serial killer, I'd want to be the one that like sent somebody out on a good high. No, I'm just saying, I would never do that. I'm sorry. Look, I have a very sick, twisted sense of humor. So I'm just saying, like, if I was going to be, I mean, at least send somebody out on a good high or something. Is what I'm saying.
Yep, but like I said, they don't really care about the patient.
I know they don't.
About the incident, what the incident does for them.
All right, Bruce, quick question. So, man, I could sit here and talk to you forever. Any other new projects? Like, when one person gets a book out there, they're always like, all right, what's going to be my next one? You're going to stay in the same area, or do you have other interest of something you might want to write about?
This is the one particular area that actually I never thought I'd get into. When I was working at the VA, I had a whole smorgasbord, if you will, of cases to pick and choose from at hospitals, like drug diversion and theft and fraud and bribery and all the other crimes that could occur in a hospital. And the last thing I ever thought I would be involved in is medical serial killers. And after doing one case successfully, and then a second, and then a third, sort of became the expert on this. And I've traveled throughout the world and lecture on this. And I enjoy, in particular, speaking to nurses and medical professionals and police. So this has sort of become my vocation.
Now, medical serial killers, like, definitely when they're coming to kill list, is definitely bigger and like just bigger numbers than the stereotypical serial killers, correct?
Absolutely correct. Absolutely.
Like death tolls, you said that one person had over 300. I can't tell you of one serial killer here in the United States that's gotten over 100 the good old way.
No, no, and even the most, or I should say, the least successful medical serial killers kill at least close to 15 people before they get caught, because the initial deaths are usually written off as a result of their natural disease processes,
Or an accident.
or an accident. Or I'll tell you this: when I first got involved in this, and I looked in a patient's medical records at the VA, I mean, the VA keeps patients longer than the private sector, and some of these poor guys had so many things wrong with them. I didn't know you could still be alive and have this much wrong with you. And now I'm supposed to prove they were murdered. So it's very, very easy to write off the deaths as a result of their natural disease progression.
Yeah. What needs to be done? Final question, in your opinion, what needs to be done for us to fix the medical problem we have with taking care of our veterans?
I must say, the VA has come a long way from the 1970s, and I think they generally do a really good job. But any hospital system that large, you're going to have some good hospitals and some bad hospitals. I actually have to compliment, President Trump. I think he did a lot of good things.
I think he did too.
For the VA hospital system, but I don't think it'll ever be perfect. The best thing we could do is educate, and educate to make sure that the VA staff is the most educated and most professional they can be.
What about mental health, though? When people think about physical health, amputees, loss of limbs, stuff like that. Is mental something that they're paying more attention to now? And has there ever been any? Has there ever been any medical serial killers in the psychiatric field?
You know what? I'm thinking. I'm going through my data. He's here, and
sorry, I didn't mean to throw you a curveball there.
No, that's quite all right. And there was one particular medical serial killer who had a residency in psychiatry, but he didn't really practice psychiatry for a very long time. So I would have to say that I am personally unaware of any. But just to answer your question about mental health, the VA has changed dramatically. For many years, there were no health services for women at the VA because there were a very, very small number of women veterans. And of course, that has changed dramatically. And of course, PTSD now, has so much scientific evidence supporting it and working with individuals that have PTSD, that it's much better now than it's ever been. But there's still a ways to go.
Would it make you all right, I just thought about this though. Okay. So, like how they had the Saw movies. What if you had like a doctor that was a psychiatrist, but he would put thoughts into their heads on how they could harm themselves? Would that be considered a medical serial killer?
I would say so. I would.
That's an interesting dilemma because, because you're using your freedom of speech. You see what I'm saying? And yes. It's not like, but you're putting thoughts into people that are maybe not mentally stable.
Well, you know what? There was actually a case. It was not a medical professional, but it was a case about a woman who would go online and she would interact with people who had psychological problems, and she would talk to them about suicide. She would actually convince them to commit suicide, claiming that she was going to do it along with them. Of course, she didn't do it. She just let them do it, and she was actually prosecuted for that.
Wow. Well, listen, Mr. Sackman, tell people once again, Mr. Bruce Sackman, how they can find your book and your website.
The book is Behind the Murder Curtain. Special Agent Bruce Sackman hunts doctors and nurses who kill our veterans. And the website is behindthemurdercurtain.com.
Wait, you get to call yourself Special Agent? Because if so, that's pretty cool. That's like some X-Files type stuff, like Special Agent Scolder or Mulder and Scully. Like, I mean,
yes,
that's
we were
pretty badass.
And I was the special agent in charge. So
Yeah, so you were like the smoking man from the X-Files then.
exactly.
All right, Special Agent Bruce Sackman in charge. I really appreciate the interview, and I'm sorry if I asked some weird or dumb questions.
No, the questions were great. I enjoyed it very much.
And that's the show for today. Thanks for listening to the Tuddle Daily Podcast. Hey, don't be a dickhead. Do us a favor. Like, share, and subscribe to the show. Also, check out the Tuddle category at 315live.com. The Tuddle Daily Podcast is brought to you by Starfire Transport, StitchYouUp.com, and PocketPairClub.com. Special thanks to show producer Vulture and co-host Sirach. Show voiceover services brought to you by JCVoiceover.com and The Little Cheese Show. Download and subscribe to The Little Cheese Show everywhere podcasts are found. If you want to help support the show, go to paypal.me/TuddleOnTheRadio. You have something you want to say? Tuddle@gmail.com or leave a voicemail at 407-270-3044. To follow all Tuddle social media, go to Tuddle.net. That's Tuddle with 2Ds.net. Thanks again for all your support, and we'll see you tomorrow on the Tuddle Daily Podcast.
I get ignorant in normal situations.
What you mean?
What the fuck you mean?
What are you talking about?
Nigga, what the fuck is you talking about?
Oh, shit!